Are they going to let people out of jail that are in there for weed?
I don't know if they've really decided on that yet. I would like
the
to
prison
keep
system would
right?
be, it'd be like the commercial real estate market of like, well, we better go find some more people to arrest. 'Cause isn't it like, I think Jeremy, you probably know what the statistics of people in jail for marijuana.
It's very,
crazy.
very high. Now, there have been in some states, even in California, some initiatives to kind of clear some of that out over the years.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would probably clear out a lot of people on long sentences too.
Welcome to the Payments Experts Podcast, a podcast of Global Legal Law Firm. We hope you enjoy this episode.
We have in studio today managing partner James Huber, as well as associate attorney Matthew Luciani. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. Today we're talking about marijuana and pot. The laws are changing, huh?
Marijuana and pot. Yeah, I mean, we run into, weed, there was a green rush that everybody thought was gonna, everyone was gonna get rich. We had a bunch of clients actually that went out and said, hey, I'm gonna go be a farmer and this, that, the other thing. Not a lot of people did it because they over-regulated it. In California, I think they run all the dispensary, like the MedMens and all of them, they say they're running at a loss leader because they're paying so much tax and everything like that. And, it's something that continues to get regulated, so it's hard to process payments for these companies, but a lot of people have figured it out. But you got to keep your head on a swivel. We see these things go up. I mean, how people were processing weed in the beginning is they get them a Stripe or Square account and, you're up for 3 months and then you're shut down. And then they just do the same thing with all the other processors. And what we found is nobody really seems to care in the ecosystem. First, the card brands don't care. The processors don't care. They all just don't want to know about it. So when people are out selling this or thinking about selling it, it's keep your head on a swivel because these opportunities come up. And, what we're here today is to talk about a new regulation. And so hopefully that gets some people's, creative juices flowing about how to sell weed in a, the least risky fashion.
Yeah, so to James's point, this is kind of a deregulation that's happening to a certain extent. It's going to be long-term. It's going to take place over quite a few months, but the Department of Justice issued a notice of proposed rulemaking, and they are going to reschedule marijuana, which would actually allow a lot less red tape from the standpoint of banking and electronic payments because it would now be on the same schedule or classification as drugs like Tylenol with codeine. So one of the biggest issues that James mentioned is before it was more of turn a blind eye to it, right? And there were compliant ways to actually process payments, but you technically couldn't do it on a credit card because of the card brand's rules and how marijuana was technically illegal under federal law. And the first time that there was really a change in the treatment from a formal standpoint that was probably most significant was 2009 with the Ogden memo. And then that was when we kind of started to see some people argue and there's three pretty major public opinions that came out between 2013 and 14 after the Ogden memo, two of which they kind of used the Ogden memo as the basis for their arguments to some extent, and actually tried to argue that it was a de facto rescheduling of marijuana because it was the first time that the federal government acknowledged that there were some medical benefits. But really all that was guidelines for federal prosecutors in states where it was legal medicinally and how to prosecute it. It didn't actually change anything other than some express guidelines.
Right. Well, I think it just, you wrote in your memo, I was just looking as, use your discretion with prosecutors, which, my red flag goes up is like, look out black people, because that's mainly how these things are enforced.
Yeah. Racial profiling is always going to be a massive, massive impact on anything drug related because of the way that crime statistics are, even to a certain extent. But what's really
Are they going to let people out of jail that are in there for weed?
I don't know if they've really decided on that yet. I would like
The prison system would be, it'd be like the commercial real estate market of like, well, we better go find some more people to arrest. 'Cause isn't it like, I think Jeremy, you probably know what the statistics of people in jail for marijuana.
It's very,
crazy.
very high. Now, there have been in some states, even in California, some initiatives to kind of clear some of that out over the years.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would probably clear out a lot of people on long sentences too. Just weed, yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. Jay,
I would say
don't
like
know.
10, I would guess.
6 to 10, something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
That's still high.
But it's also, are you in there? You got arrested for weed, and then I murdered a guy, so I'm in there longer
Right.
because of that.
That was actually one
Gotta
of the
get that
cases.
guy out.
Yeah, exactly. That was actually one of the criminal law cases that happened in 2013 when the guy tried to argue that the scheduling of marijuana as a Schedule 1 at that point and how it affected his sentence was unconstitutional.
Right.
But it didn't win.
Yeah, that creates quite a conundrum because the sentencing, it's going to be you've exponentially. So if you just wipe off one of them, do you get resentenced?
Well, it
Have they
plays
ever
into-
done that?
Well,
Right.
they're
That'd be
with the
interesting.
3 strikes law, right? The way that
Right.
works,
There's a lot
if
of
that
states that do
happened-
that, so, yeah.
absolutely. So
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, obviously that argument didn't win because the CSA, Controlled Substance Act, has a very defined 8-factor evaluation for the scheduling. I mean, the funny thing is you look at that and you think of marijuana and it probably doesn't fit the bill for at least half of those things to really classify it as a dangerous drug. But the one thing that was the biggest impact...
I don't know.
Yeah? It's a gateway drug, right?
I'll say, it's so strong. I have a friend who says, like, look, you either, with marijuana, you're either all in or you're all out. Because if you use it just occasionally, you're wrecked. But same thing with alcohol.
Yeah.
If
Sure.
well, no, I think you build up a tolerance to alcohol, don't you? Yeah, because when I was 12
sure.
or however young, maybe I was a little older than 12, but not much.
do you guys
Yeah, I
think
drank
there's
like 2
truth-
beers.
Do you think there's truth to my dad has said, he grew up smoking pot in the 60s, right? He says that the stuff that they're producing nowadays is substantially stronger than it was
100%.
back
Oh,
in the
yeah,
day,
no, there's
so-
scientific evidence of the THC levels being significantly higher. You could go to a dispensary and I find THC levels as much as 30% even sometimes
For
now,
research
which is
purposes.
crazy.
That's right.
Yes, for research purposes. But does a high person get in a fight if they're just high?
No, but they might crash their
hypothetically,
car.
right?
Yeah.
So like they're probably drunker on something else also. That's like it's more of a. I think people think of it as a happy drug than a angry drug per se.
Yeah. Well, what is it? I mean, look, so the Safe Banking Act hasn't passed. That's the Safe Banking Act is, look, anybody who's dealing with marijuana in the bank, in the payments, well, in the banking, but it would trickle down and you'd think it would fall to the processors and everybody. We're not going after you. And that's gotten held up, but it's basically been the rule of the land. And I think we all agree, I don't know if, I could see Biden maybe if he does it, he could push it through. I mean, he did this move. It's probably a little political, but I could see him. Well, I mean, everything would be political, but yeah, I think that I could see him doing it. Trump's not going to touch it. He's not going to pass safe banking.
No, but I think as far as the rescheduling, that still gives a large amount of reprieve. Obviously, banks are going to have to adjust from a risk tolerance perspective. Even processors will, but the biggest differentiating factor, you mentioned it earlier, some of these companies are kind of running at losses on paper because of how high the taxes are.
Well, it's the city.
Yeah, and they're as a Schedule 1 drug, these businesses have certain penalties related to being associated with a Schedule 1 drug, or they might not even have certain deductions available because of its status as a Schedule 1 drug. So I think two of the biggest things that this could potentially do from the banking perspective and also the individual cannabis businesses is increase revenue, but also
How does it increase revenue?
it increases revenue by limiting some of the expenses that they formerly had and making more deductions available from a business and tax
Well, that's true. Yeah, because they get nailed because they can't write anything off.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, that'll be huge.
So that's huge from that standpoint. There's going to be some big tax implications from that standpoint. And then to James's point about the Safe Banking Act, we're kind of operating under that, but from the same standpoint, if it was a Schedule 3 as opposed to a Schedule 1 or in any different category where you're starting to treat it a little bit more like prescription drugs, then it really lifts almost all of the restrictions off of your availability to bank with a federal bank.
Right. So it's scheduled with Tylenol with codeine, but Tylenol with codeine, I think you have to be a doctor and you have to get a prescription, right? So, CVS processes payments all day, no problem, no one's coming after them. And then, so is it just, it's Schedule 2 for us, but what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for the dispensary selling it? I mean, you see what I'm saying?
So I think how that gets affected is recreational dispensaries still won't be able to process credit cards, right? They'll still have to go the cashless ATM route or the cash route because it's not a prescription drug at that level, right? But from the medicinal standpoint, I think you can. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to anymore.
I think you could. Yeah, so what do you call it? The medical dispensary? Is there a word for that?
I think like
Do those even exist?
not really in California anymore, right?
Like you
They're all kind of the same.
But if you're a medical one, like I think you can still get your medical card in California.
Yeah.
I don't know why anybody would, but
less tax on
maybe
the
if they're
purchase.
concerned if their job is going to do a check or something.
But it's legal.
Well, it's also less tax on the purchases.
Well, yeah. So, but how does the dispensary get anyone, the medical one, get anyone to come in their doors if you have to go get a card? Unless there's a guy, like I remember in Venice, it would be like, here's the doctor. You go through on the way in. I heard.
So in New Jersey, when they passed recreational, they would sell recreational and medicinal out of some of the same dispensaries in some instances. And if you had your medical card, you wouldn't pay the same level of tax.
So you could, you could say, come get your medical card and I won't surcharge you like crazy or, cash discount you because I can process over here in a compliant manner. But some states are all medical, so it's great for them.
Florida.
Right. And then some states, they still do have the medical dispensaries. Like I know, I think in Oregon, they still exist and they're pretty robust.
Yeah, so in those circumstances, I would expect them
those
to
guys are
actually
hooked
get
up.
ISOs now.
Yeah,
You know?
they should be good.
They should be able to, ISOs should be able to service them now. So like, and that's one of the things with ISOs a lot of times is they operate in niches, right? So like, this does open the door for cannabis ISO per se. As it is right now, we deal with a lot of CBD ISOs even.
What do you guys think overall, in terms of the payments industry, you guys see this as a positive step forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. Is go target the medical, go target all the medical dispensaries. Go get them. They're going to be pumped, but you'd want to hire some lawyers to probably get those all pushed through to give you, a solid package, and then an opinion letter being hey, this is legit now. Biden saved us all by this heroic. Anyways, so yeah, I think it's trending in the right direction, but it also goes again to no one's gonna touch this stuff.
No.
You all should be fine. like they should get credit card processing, and I don't really know why they're terminating them, because they're, you know, well, they have to if they find out, but it should, it's everything's trending in the right direction, because it's California. We were talking yesterday. There's like 2 of them popped up right around here, and I think that they do a lot of transactions, and I think they would be lucrative if they weren't getting taxed so hard. And then I forgot that they can't write anything off. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they get creative around that, but it's interesting that these 2. I mean, the one of them's on Main Street, Encinitas, so that one would probably be pretty profitable. It's like town is run by, you know, teenagers. And wait, how old do you have to be? You be 21?
Isn't it 21? I think it is. Actually, yeah.
21.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've had a fake ID since I was 15, so. Well, I don't have one now. Yeah, I don't have one now.
I still have one. No,
but yeah, I would assume it's probably pretty easy to get in there too, and then like shoulder tap some guy. You remember doing that? You'd be like, "Hey, old guy, go buy me some beer." Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I definitely see it as a win for the payment processing world, though, because I really think that we're going to see ISOs specifically targeting the niche of medicinal dispensaries now. You know, that's going to come to increase processing revenue. And then from the cannabis standpoint, as we mentioned, the deductions thing is huge. I think that that's the biggest takeaway and real implication for them. Obviously, there's the convenience factor of now we can process credit cards after this is finally rescheduled, but those margins are so thin for them right now.
I got arrested one time and I had my fake ID. I just remembered on me, and it was like a gnarly charge, because they're like, you have like a falsified government document or something.
They try to really...
Yeah, they really got me.
Scare you straight.
No, yeah. When I was like, I'm gonna fight all that. I punched a bouncer, and I got charged with like intimidation, like threat by intimidation. And I was like, how could I challenge a bouncer? So I was like, take it to trial. I was in college.
Yeah.
And because I was like, bouncer, like, he's probably huge. Good. And I was like, this won't work, because I looked at it was like this weird Montana statute that was like, you have to like use your, you know, force and, you know, be all scary, and you probably intimidated with him, because it was a weird one. I don't know why it wasn't just like assault or battery or whatever, but it was like this weird thing that they tried to do. And I was like, bring him in, let's go to the trial. Guy walks in. Hi, I'm the bouncer. I was like, I plead guilty.
Was he really? Was he a smaller
He's
guy?
a little dude, yeah.
Funny.
And I cleaned him up.
What I was thinking, James...
But I didn't remember what he looked like. So I didn't know that I did indeed probably intimidate him.
James's attorney just does this, you know?
I was self-represented.
Oh,
yeah.
That's great. You were made to be an attorney, James.
Yeah, there was my lesson. I was like, yeah.
Well, what it made me think is if the bouncer was a black guy, might have been a different story.
In Montana?
In Montana, well...
Probably would have been a lot, like, on your way, sir. Awful.
They would have thought that he incited it.
Yeah, exactly.
Gentlemen, as we come to the towards the end of this podcast, by the way, I think we should get Ian Rassman back on. I bet you he has some thoughts about this. That'd be a good
An unfortunate thing is I think we're suing him currently now, so, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it might not be the greatest time to talk.
Maybe not, James.
I do have a buddy who is on involved in the legislation to some extent in New Jersey who might be interested.
Great.
But.
Okay, interesting. What I was curious about is there anyone in the payment space that this affects negatively? Like, is there anyone that's got a niche, kind of has a target on the market? And
Visa. You know, now they can't hit you with the NCAs and the reviews for medicinal marijuana, right?
Yeah. No, this helps everybody.
Cool. Okay. Excellent. Closing thoughts, gentlemen.
Good to go.
Good to go.
Thank you.
Awesome. This has been the Payments Experts Podcast, a podcast of global legal law firm. We've had in studio Associate Attorney Matthew Luciani, as well as our managing partner, James Huber, looking at his next call coming up. You guys, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Payments Experts Podcast, a podcast of Global Legal Law Firm. Visit us online today at globallegallawfirm.com.